Coming up on Network Africa. Muslims around the world celebrate Eid-El-Fitr, marking the end of fasting in the month of Ramadan. 38 migrants found dead in shipwreck off the coast of Djibouti. Plus, South Africa's former President Jacob Zuma wins court bid to contest in the upcoming May election. Hello and welcome to the program. Today I'm Layo Olarinde. Muslims all over the world are celebrating Eid-El-Fitr, which marks the end of fasting in the month of Ramadan. Ramadan is a time for spiritual reflection, prayer, doing good deeds, and spending time with family and friends. The day is usually marked with prayers at Eid grounds with large congregations. Eid-El-Fitr is a time to visit friends and families, and it's traditional to wear new clothes and recite a short prayer called a takbir on the way to the mosque, as well as eat something sweet like a date. Well, here in Nigeria, President Bola Tinubu joined other Muslim faithful at Dodan Barracks praying ground in Lagos to observe the Eid-el-Fitr prayers. The Deputy Governor of Lagos State, Kadiri Hamzat, and the former governor of the state were some of the dignitaries that also observed the Eid prayers at the barracks. In his sermon, the Chief Imam of Lagos, Sheikh Suleiman Abu Nola, said that the festivity promotes a culture of sacrifice, unity and tolerance among the Muslim faithful. On his part, President Tinubu enjoined Muslims to sustain the lessons from the month of Ramadan.
The kind of resilience, sacrifice, endurance that we have, we should preserve that for the country. Be kind and be cheerful giver. Love our country better than any other country. That's the only one that we have. And we must continue to protect the integrity of our government and leadership. The new hope is alive, well and fine, and Nigerians will continue to be very hopeful. Without hope, there's no salvation. Without hope, there's no development. Without hope, there's no life.
Over in Niger as well, the military head of state, General Abdurrahmane Tichiani, attended the Eid-el-Fitr prayer in the capital of Niamey. Footage shows General Tiani arriving and greeting officials and performing the Eid-el-Fitr prayer with other officials and worshippers. Well, in July last year, a military coup in Niger resulted in the removal of President Mohamed Bazoum and the installation of General Tichiani, and he was the former leader of the Presidential Guard. It marked the fifth coup in Niger since gaining independence from France in 1960, and the seventh military takeover to occur in West and Central Africa within 3 years. Morocco's second largest reservoir that serves some of its major cities and has been central to farm irrigation is drying up. Well, according to satellite images analyzed, Al Masira Dam, which sits around halfway between Casablanca and Marrakesh, contains just 3% of the average amount of water that was there 9 years ago. 6 consecutive years of drought and climate change, which causes record temperatures that lead to more evaporation, have threatened water supplies across the North African nation and also hit agriculture and the economy in general. Well, over the past months, a searing heat wave has been experienced in West Africa, and with the weather being quite unbearable, affecting millions of people. The region is currently experiencing unusually intense heat. Temperatures exceeded 40 degrees Celsius in some regions, prompting the Ghanaian and Nigerian meteorological services to issue heat warnings. Or in Mali, over 100 people died because of an extreme heat wave in the southwestern town of Kayes that recorded a temperature high of 48.5 degrees Celsius. Well, joining us now on the program to discuss how we can better protect ourselves under such weather conditions is Dr. Agbo Ibuta, a family physician. He joins us now from Abuja. Happy Eid to you, Doctor. Welcome to the program.
Same to you, Lyle. Good to be here.
Well, our discussion today is not far-fetched. The extreme heat wave being experienced for some months now. What are the effects of such weather on the human body?
First and foremost, at such high temperatures, from the health point of view, what we would start seeing are cases of heat illness. And when you talk of heat illness, you are talking basically of heat exhaustion at one end and heat stroke at the other end. So what happens is that your normal body temperature is about 37, thereabout. But by the time you have body atmospheric temperature going as high as 40 and above, like we had in Kayet in Mali, where temperatures were as much as 48 degrees, it causes a lot of problems. Your body would try to retain the same body temperature that is permitted by your physiology. So you will start sweating, you will start drinking water. And by the time the rate at which you are sweating is much more than is sufficient to compensate for the heat buildup and allow your body to cool down, your body temperature begins to rise. And by the time the body temperature rises to as much as 40 and above, a lot of mechanisms in the body become disturbed. So the key thing is that for your normal body functions, there are temperatures that are acceptable, 37 degrees plus or minus, but by 40 degrees and above, the minute mechanisms, your breathing, your brain activity, your nervous activity, the ability of your lungs to function, the liver to function, the heart to function, are disturbed and distorted because of what you call a denaturing of protein. So at that point, by the time a patient has lost so much, has been losing fluid, the blood volume will begin to drop. Body temperatures will drop. By the time body temperatures have stopped dropping and are unable to drop further, it becomes an abnormality in the physiology. So you have patients who are having fainting attacks, they are having distortion of their coordination, they have headaches, they have cramps, they have problems with the breathing, and they become tired and weak. At this stage, they are able to explain their problem. They are still coordinated. They are still having cognitive function. So they tell you that, look, I'm very thirsty, I'm weak, I'm having cramps, I'm having headache. That patient, more often than not, has heat exhaustion. And if nothing is done at this point, and mind you, this patient will also be sweating, but if nothing is done at this point, the mechanism for heat loss becomes exhausted completely. The person stops to sweat because the person is significantly dehydrated, and the blood pressure crashes, the brain function goes into a dysfunction, you have problems with confusion and even coma. Even the heart may start having some abnormalities. We call them arrhythmias. The liver may fail to function, respiration may go into some form of dysfunction. And then because the blood pressure has reduced as a result of increased volume of sweating, the amount of blood that is going to the kidneys reduced. The ability of your kidneys to wash the blood and normal function also reduces, and patients can have kidney failure. At this stage, the patient would have a heat stroke and can also have a weakness in some arms of the body and can actually have cerebrovascular attack. So patients who are exposed to sustained elevated temperature will lose a lot of fluid, which will and have a buildup of body temperature, which will cause a dysfunction in their physiology, an multi-organ failure from heart to kidneys to lungs to livers and even stroke. And at this point, they have a heat stroke. So the spectrum at one edge is called the heat exhaustion. And if unmitigated, you have heat stroke.
Heat stroke.
We need to be able to prevent our patients from being exposed to long periods of elevated temperature. So we need to know that if you have temperatures above sustained and above 40, 38, 40 and above, you're at risk, especially if you spend a lot of time outside and you're not taking enough fluids. And patients who have any of those symptoms like headache, cramps, body weakness, and all of that, and have been exposed, there's a recent history of exposure to high temperatures, should be taken to safe areas immediately and given oral fluids to take. But patients who have stroke, loss of consciousness, these have heat stroke, they must be taken to the hospital. It's an emergency, and they are best nursed in intensive care units or high dependency units. So this is a serious problem, and we need to educate our population.
Yes, you've just answered my next questions, the symptoms of heat stroke and, moving from heat exhaustion to heat stroke. Thank you so much for that. But we find ourselves, living under this high temperatures. I mean, there's really nowhere to go. So how can one really cope with this particular reality, which scientists are saying is one of the effects, the numerous effects of climate change that we're seeing today?
Okay, so we can approach it from a public health point of view. Number one is that we need to create awareness for the public. The government, well-meaning organizations, CSOs, CBOs, and the rest need to hit the waves. And I mean, a big kudos to Network Africa for bringing that information. Then, but on the personal level, there are two things you can do, two categories of things you can do. You can, number one, reduce exposure to heat. Obviously, if you must go out, you must use things like umbrellas, for example. You must wear light clothing. And in addition to that, you reduce the amount of the duration of exposure you have to hot environment. If this is not possible, then you know that your risk is significant. On the second arm, you have to increase your fluid intake, because one of the God-given ways we use to regulate our body temperature is through sweating. And it will surprise you that you can lose liters and liters of water on a hot day. So what you need to do is to keep drinking, because as you continue to drink, what happens is that you sweat and your body temperature drops. But most importantly, we must protect the most susceptible people, which are children below 5 years of age, and then elderly people. Important for children below 5 years of age is because most of their body is actually fluid. So while in adults, half of your body may be made up of 50% of your body mass may be made up of water. In children, is as much as 70%. So the impact and the effect of heat stroke in children and then also elderly people is much high. So we must protect this population of people. But for the other set of the population, we increase our fluid intake, reduce our exposure to hot weather, and where necessary, we use umbrellas, light clothing, and make sure we just keep drinking.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Dr. Thank you so much for your, it's been enlightening. Thank you so much, family physician, Dr. Agbo Ebota. Thank you.
Pleasure.
We'll move on to other stories now. The United Nations Migration Agency says 38 migrants are dead after a ship capsized off Djibouti on a popular route to Yemen. 22 others were rescued. Now, the International Organization for Migration says many of those who died are women and children, including babies. Rescue teams searched for 6 other migrants who were thought to be on board. Now, Djibouti is the main transit country for migrants trying to reach Gulf nations from countries in the Horn of Africa, such as Ethiopia and Somalia, in search of work. The IOM says that conflict and insecurity, as well as climate change, are major factors forcing people to attempt the crossing. In the meantime, Rwandan President Paul Kagame has met with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak at the Downing Street number 10. The meeting comes amid the UK's government's stalled plan to send some asylum seekers on a one-way trip to Rwanda. And reports Local media in the UK that housing in Kigali outlined for the scheme had been sold. Britain and Rwanda signed a deal almost 2 years ago that would see migrants who cross the English Channel in small boats sent to the East African country, where they would remain permanently. Well, the agreement has faced multiple legal challenges and a back-and-forth tussle in the British Parliament. We'll take a break now on the program. Still ahead. As the war in Sudan nears its one-year mark, over 25 million people face humanitarian crisis. That's according to the UN Refugee Agency. Welcome back to the program. A court in South Africa has ruled former President Jacob Zuma can run in next month's parliamentary elections. Well, Mr. Zuma had contested the Electoral Commission's initial decision, which disqualified him from candidacy due to a contempt of court conviction. Now, Mr. Zuma represents a new political party, having distanced himself from the African National Congress. That's the party he formerly headed. The former president is currently the #1 candidate on the Umkhonto weSizwe MK party's list. Analysts say the MK party's win put the governing African National Congress, ANC, in a precarious position.
I believe that, everything that's happening is actually the chickens coming home to roost for the ANC, because the ANC spent so much time defending Jacob Zuma all the way from the rape trial, and then we had Nkandla and how they defended him in parliament, and then we had, the various corruption cases with the Guptas and the entire state capture Zondo commission, which showed the various ways in which, when he was in power, Jacob Zuma and his alleged accomplices allegedly were corrupt and basically bankrupted the state. And so had they not supported and covered Zuma in that time period, we would not be sitting in this current situation that we're sitting in now. And so I think the ANC is having quite a sobering moment, and the realization that what South Africans have been saying all along, that you cannot deal with corruption in a different way because it's one of your comrades. You have to be able to deal with corruption, directly and cut it out at the stem as soon as it rears its ugly head, because all it does when you grow and you support and you defend it is that it grows. And at this point, we are now looking at former President Jacob Zuma potentially coming back to do more damage, as far as I'm concerned, than what he did the previous time.
And as the conflict in Sudan nears its one-year mark, the UN Refugee Agency is warning that over 25 million people are facing a humanitarian crisis with no end in sight. Ahead of the anniversary on the conflict on April 15, UNHCR says that Sudan and its neighbors are experiencing one of the largest and most challenging humanitarian and displacement crises in the world.
As the war in Sudan continues to rage, with the country and its neighbors dragged into one of the largest and most challenging humanitarian and displacement crises in the world. The number of Sudanese forced to flee has now surpassed 8.5 million people, with 1.8 million of them crossing borders. Despite the magnitude of the crisis, we continue to see that funding remains critically low. The 2024 Regional Refugee Response Plan is just 7% funded, and very similarly is the situation for the Humanitarian Response Plan inside Sudan.
635,000 people have arrived to South Sudan since 15th of April last year, and that represents more than 5% of the population of South Sudan. So I think if we want to make a comparison, if we're talking about Germany, that would be 4.5 million people arriving in 1 year, in less than 1 year. And if we're talking about the United States, that would be 17.6 million people arriving in less than 1 year. This is the world's poorest country. So you can imagine the pressure that has been put on this country since 15th of April. Daily average of arrivals since last 15th of April, a year ago, is 1,800 people a day, every single day.
Well, the federal government of Nigeria has begun the construction of the 700-kilometer Lagos to Calabar coastal superhighway barely a month after approval from the Federal Executive Council. But for businesses and structures on the right-of-way of the proposed coastal highway who have been served with removal notice, including the popular landmark beach in Lagos, it's a mix of emotions for owners and vendors. Our correspondent Kelly Egiga reports.
It's the construction of an iconic and monumental civil engineering project, the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Superhighway. When completed, the 700-kilometer-long coastal highway will enter the record books among iconic coastal routes like the Pacific Coastal Highway in the US and the Wide Atlantic Highway in Ireland. The first phase of 47.47 kilometer starts from Ahmadu Bello Way, Victoria Island in Lagos, and the coastal road will pass through the Lekki Deep Seaport, Ogun, Ondo, Delta, Bayelsa, Rivers, Akwa Ibom, before culminating in Cross River. But that's not all. The superhighway, which is being built by high-tech construction company, has 5 lanes on each side of the dual carriageway and a train track in the middle. And to avoid delays, the Minister of Works, Dave Umahi, has been up and about ensuring compliance with contractors. Mr. Umahi says the coastal road will, among other things, further integrate the north and south in terms of movement of people, goods, and services.
We are very confident that this project, 700 kilometers, and the phases 2, it will be executed successfully under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
The end point of the project is Calabar, the Cross River State capital, and residents and stakeholders believe the project is a catalyst for economic growth.
This investment is one of the biggest investments in the history of infrastructure in not just Nigeria, not just West Africa, but in Africa as a continent and as a whole. We're excited about it. The people of Calabar, especially the Southern Senatorial District where the road will terminate, are extremely excited. If they have one prayer, if they have one amendment, it would be that while the Lagos end has started, that it would be wise that the Calabar end should start as well, so that they are being constructed concurrently, such that it bridges the time in which it would take for the road to be completed.
But while the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Road will usher in a new era of ambitious infrastructural development projects in the country, vendors at the popular landmark beach resort site, built to be pulled down, are struggling to come to terms with the 7-day demolition notice.
We're given 7 days to leave. 7 days to do what? What do you begin to pick up for 7 days, and to where? So if it comes to, to that where we have to leave, I can't do anything. I'd pack up my suitcases, give up the flats, give up the business, and go back to the UK, which would be a shame because we're the ones who constantly sing the praises of this country, this place.
We have really sprung to action.
Kemi Oshinibi is the CEO of Landmark Kids Club. She tells me it's been terrifying the past 1 week.
I have about almost 27 staff here. With our total ecosystem that we support, it's almost 100 people. And right now, everyone is feeling very uncertain. Everyone is feeling very scared. And it's really unfathomable right now. It's really, really, really upsetting. Very, very, very upsetting.
But there is some sort of optimism from the CEO and founder of the Landmark Africa Group.
Obviously, there's several conversations that are taking place. I've had at all levels of governments, both state and federal. I've had incredibly positive feedback. And some of the noise is coming out of the government in terms of supporting businesses, supporting FDI, increasing tourism. There's both a commissioner for tourism and a minister for tourism for the first time in Nigeria at the same time. Tells you that there must be someone that's saying that we're serious about tourism here. I can't see how a collection of decisions will lead to the demolition of effectively the most impactful and largest tourist platform in West Africa.
I'm standing a few meters away from the beach and the currents have been really strong, so I cannot go any further. But take a look at the children, the family and friends and perhaps colleagues who have come here to unwind and get away from the business and hustle Lagos is known for. All of this could be torn apart any moment from now if the government goes ahead with the planned demolition. But for the over 3,000 staff who work here and earn a living from this, their future hangs in the balance with the proposed planned demolition to make way for the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Road. From the landmark beach area here in Lagos, Nigeria, Kelly Egiga, Channels Television News.
And that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.